Hello everyone. Welcome to one another week of chess analysis with Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan. Sorry for the few minutes delay. I was ensuring that the connection was all good. So if you're watching this video, a confirmation that you can hear me and see me clear would be highly appreciated. So last week after our session, this is I think our third week of sessions we are doing. I'm doing this as an interactive session where you can join me for 1 hour of a topic that is chosen by you in a lecture, vote. And last week I had asked if we should watch a game by John Nunn or Tony Miles, and actually the votes in Facebook and Twitter combined together ended in a tie. So I wasn't sure whose game to choose. So I ended up choosing a game which was played by both of them. Like John Nunn was white against Anthony Miles, who played the black pieces. So before I go deep into the lecture, before I start the lecture today, I just wanted to say some general things, to the players who are watching. Candidates is going on, so very exciting games after round one, and round two I think is going on live right now. So definitely check that out in any of your favorite channels or live commentary. A lot of strong players are giving live commentary, so you can benefit a lot out of it. So yeah, so before, yes Azam, thanks for the confirmation that you can hear me. Thank you for that. So today the session we are going to look at is a game played between John Nunn and Anthony Miles in London in 1982. So this game, for the people who maybe not familiar with who John Nunn is, or who is not familiar with Anthony Miles, a brief description would be John Nunn is one of the most famous English players to have played the game. He's considered to be a prodigy, a talent, a super genius kind of thing. And he is like one of the youngest Oxford undergraduate. So, he went on to actually quit chess for some time to pursue mathematics and become extremely good at studies. So, and he's a grandmaster. And the other person whom we are talking is another very, very famous and very eccentric chess player, Anthony Miles, who is no more. And he was the first English grandmaster to earn a title over the board play. Very, very creative player. Very, his very fascinating player. In case if you're very curious to study about a very interesting chess player, I would strongly recommend you to study the games of Anthony Miles, and in general his character as a person and what he did. Okay, so let's jump into the game. So the game, John Nunn plays white. So he starts with e4, c5, knight f3, d6. So we have the knight out system. Used to be very popular till the Berlin became popular, I would say. Now certainly the preference is, if you play the black pieces, is to choose a solid opening. So more and more players would choose e4, e5. The only strong pair who sticks to knight off on a very consistent basis is Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who is considered the foremost expert in knight off with black pieces right now. So here a6, if black plays, would be knight off, and Tony Miles goes for g6, more aggressive approach, trying to take the game into the dragon opening territory. So here normal variations include like bishop e3 for white, bishop c4, and so on. Positionally, if you want to play, you can play bishop e2. So John Nunn chooses a line which is considered dubious but has some tricky ideas behind it. So if you can navigate through the tricky ideas, then black is doing completely fine. And that move that John Nunn played was f4. So this is a okay move in case of white. Let's say black had played a6, f4 is a pretty decent continuation. But for g6, f4 is a dubious line that has a trap behind it. That's like the main idea why white is playing f4. And John Nunn, I guess he was hoping that Tony Miles falls for it. And let's say, what is the most natural move? When we go g6, it is to fianchet over bishop, right? So f4 is aimed against that actually. So let's say if we do go bishop g7 in this position, I would suggest the viewers, maybe take a minute or two, try to find why the most natural move, bishop g7, is actually a dubious move, and which is why white actually played f4. So to the viewers, you can put your variations in the comments. I'll be reading the comments during the session actively. So in case if you have any variations you feel like could be played, definitely we can discuss it. And I can also backtrack certain moves in case if you are not clear on certain variations. Okay, so let me explain why bishop g7 is maybe not the most accurate move here. The point being f4 was played with a purpose, as I said, and that is to get better control of the e5 square. So white can just play e5 in this position. So white is attacking the knight, and let's say black plays a very natural move, but again another dubious move, which is d takes e5. Natural to capture, right? But then white captures back, f takes e5, and then knight g4. Because if we do go knight f d7 and all this, we are allowing e6 break. So knight g4, and here we see that this knight is kind of in a precarious situation over here, and white kind of skillfully exploits that by going bishop b5 check. The problem here for black is that black would like to play bishop d7 and block the check, but unfortunately it fails to. Queen takes g4 and white just ends up with an extra piece. So for bishop b5 check, king f8, and then comes knight e6 check, and then white wins this queen at the end of the line. So this is the problem with bishop g7 and e5 in general, and black's position gets even worse if he takes d e5. If black goes something like knight h5, let's say, then I think it's okayish. I mean slightly worse for black after bishop b5 check, bishop d7, e6. And this is critical because if you play f e6, again white wants to exploit the pin by taking knight e6, and this queen is under threat. Knight on, g7 bishop is not in a great position. Knight g7 most likely is coming up, and white ends up with a big advantage. So for e6, if bishop takes b5, let's say, then e takes f7, king f7, knight d b5. So white has successfully managed to stop black from castling because black's king has moved now, and also the king is in a slightly not so safe position on f7. So this is what white actually had in mind if bishop g7, which is played on here. Before we go into what happened in the game, because black did not go bishop g7, obviously black knew that this was the idea behind it. But before we go deep into it, I just wanted to show one line. Let's say in case if white goes bishop b5 check instead of e5 in this position. So here black can play bishop d7, or there is a kind of an interesting idea. So let's say you did not see e5 when you played bishop g7, but then you see after bishop b5 check, e5 is still a possibility. So it is okay that we can admit our mistake. Okay, I did not see e5 in the previous turn. So here you can go knight f d7. This is a very interesting move in the perspective, even though it's a backward move. You're moving your knight from f6 to d7 back. You have solved the threat of e5 successfully, and also you have blocked from the check. You have saved the king from the check. So this is an interesting move. If you do want to calculate some variations, you can play bishop b5 check, bishop d7, e5, knight h5, and so on. And here the critical difference being after e6, f takes e6, knight e6, there is bishop takes c3 check. This check did not really exist in my opinion. Here it did exist. It's basically just the transposition, but I was thinking of a different position where it does not exist. But okay, we'll get to that position later stage. But in this position you take, and then as I mentioned, this is white. I would feel more comfortable playing white in this position due to the very weak king. So from that perspective, it is better to go knight f d7 instead of bishop d7 and reaching this particular position. Okay, so let's get back to the game. So f4 was played, and black did not go bishop g7, but black played knight c6. So he is correctly developing his piece, and also at the same time he's covering that b5 e8 diagonal. So here white makes a decision which I am pretty sure most of the players who played Sicilian would have had this question at some point or other in their Sicilian play career with white or black. So white took knight takes c6 in this position. So the question was, all the time I think there would have been this question, why don't we just take that knight? What's wrong with taking a knight? And it's just that you're changing the pawn structure. So why don't we just do this? The reason why most of the times knight takes c6 is not a good option for white is because once you play b takes c6, you get tremendous counterplay or activity for black along the b file. So black will go rook b8, take control of that semi-open file and attack the b2 pawn. And also here it kind of makes things worse for white because black was anyway going to fianchetto the bishop to g7. So he's going to add additional pressure on b2 via the bishop on g7. Even if that was not the case, let's say if the pawn was on e6 and not on g6, but let's say the pawn was back and this pawn was forward, and even in such a case rook b8 would put tremendous pressure on down the b file, which is a kind of a concern for white, because it's not just stops on putting pressure on b2, but possibly black has ideas like rook b4 and putting pressure on the e4 pawn. So that semi-open file can be very skillfully used by black to his favor, and this is the primary reason why knight takes c6 is never really recommended in most positions for white in the Sicilian knight, or for Sveshnikov or other Sicilian structures. Yeah, that's the reason. So after so very surprising decision by Nunn, but he took knight c6, so fine, and then he went e5. So black decided to go knight d7, which is in my opinion is a safer move than going knight g4 or knight h5. He drops back with his knight, and here I mean you played e5, so you can consider e6, but fe6, and I don't think white gets any counterplay for the sacrificed pawn, so makes most sense to just capture on ed6. So here is, I think, a critical moment of this. I think one of the first critical moments in this particular game. I would strongly suggest take a minute to minute and a half, and you may find it a bit surprising because you'll be like, okay, why don't we just capture e takes d6, right? That's the most natural reflex response to capture back. But here, if you do spend maybe a minute or so, you may find some idea that is outside of capturing the pawn. Let's see if you can see what that idea could be. Okay, so it's close to a minute and a half. So I'll explain why or what that other move could be other than e takes d6. And this move that I'm going to show you now is also actually a novelty that no one else has played before. So when I was analyzing this game for the session, I was thinking about this position, and then I found this idea. I mean, obviously with the help of computers which supported my idea, which said it's a possible variation. This knight f6. So what is this move all about? I mean, your pawn was captured, why are you not capturing back? The whole point behind this move, in my opinion, is that white has played f4 and opened up the center, and generally when white short castles, f2 pawn is a great kind of defense wall for the king, the f2 pawn. It stops all checks on this a7 g1 diagonal, and in general it's a great defending barrier. But as white has already pushed f4, the king may feel unsafe on the g1 square, so maybe white may be thinking of long castling as a possibility where it may feel safe. But right now I think the white king is more weak than black king, so black just goes knight f6. I mean, if white plays something like bishop e2, then most likely it will just transpose. But let's say white is greedy, or white says, okay, show me what counterplay you have, and white takes the second pawn. You take queen e7, he goes queen e2, you go bishop e6 in this position. We don't want to exchange queens when we are a pawn down. Yeah, you suggested bishop g7 in this position. It is playable, certainly. But here the point I feel is like, let's say if d7, queen e7, unfortunately after queen e2 we don't have anything other than exchanging the queens. This is the problem with this particular line, bishop g7, d7, queen e7, queen e2. So as I was just mentioning, after queen e2, bishop e6, we don't want to exchange queens, because keeping the queens is what will give us counterplay, or trying to attack the white's king. So here, let's say if white goes bishop e3 or something, or bishop d2, or let's look at bishop d2, which looks very natural because you just want to, let's say, long castle. Then comes just development move, bishop g7, long castle, short castle, and white is a pawn up, but tremendous potential for attack for black. By going rook b8, he threatens on b2. Once he moves this knight to d5, this bishop gets activated. Queen b4 is a threat coming up, so a lot of pressure on the white's queen side, and I think white's position will just collapse with few precise moves in this particular position. So in case of so this was the case if white went bishop d2. So this is if white wants to long castle. Bishop e3 also. Bishop e3, it's even like kind of worse in certain cases, because let's say bishop e3, bishop g7. If long castle, black additionally has bishop g4 if he wants, and he can try to win an exchange on e1, because if queen c4, there's queen takes e3 check. So if you go something like queen e1, bishop takes d1 and wins an exchange. That is why this variation but does not exist when you go bishop d2, because here if I go bishop g4, you just take my queen, exchange, and then you move your rook away. So that is the key difference between bishop e3 and bishop d2. So let's say instead of bishop d2 or bishop e3, if white goes queen f3, very let's say bold move, because you're like, okay, that is the queen straight in front of the king, so there should be some discovered check or something. Unfortunately, even if we give bishop g4 or bishop d5 check, white can just go queen e3. So we are not winning any material. In case of bishop takes a2, I think white will just play bishop e2 and complete his development. So we cannot be greedy and go after a pawn like on a2, especially in a situation like this. So here for queen f3, I think black can go bishop g7, perfectly fine move, and try to complete castling, because in that case, if queen takes e6 is played, then you give a check, counter check on d7, and you win the queen. So if white completes bishop d3 with the idea to short castle, now bishop d5 check, queen e3, and you win this pawn back. It's pretty much, I would guess, an equal position what we have on the board here. So instead of playing for equality, if black wants to sharpen the game a bit, he can try with rook d8. The point being, if they go bishop d3, you go bishop d5, queen e3, and you're, I don't know, I mean, you're trying some bishop g2, queen e7, bishop e7, maybe keep the king in the center. So slightly different chances from a chance perspective compared to the line that we previously saw with direct bishop g7. So this is a novelty in case if, I don't know if any of you will get this position again, I mean, if you'll get it in your own games. If you do, this is a move that you can actively consider to play, knight f6. It's a novelty till today. There's no games played in this particular move. But Tony Miles did not play knight f6. He chose the most natural move, which is also perfectly fine. He just took the pawn. He takes d6. So in this case, white goes bishop e3, and again, I think this is a position where one decision has to be made, which is, okay, what to do. I mean, you cannot play bishop g7 immediately because the d6 pawn is hanging. So if you want to, safeguard the d6 pawn, you have to go something like d5. But d5 would most likely allow bishop d4 and put some immediate pressure on this particular diagonal. So d5 may not be a great choice. So then taking all this into consideration, black went knight f6. But in my opinion, knight f6 is not the best move. It's actually a dubious move. So then the question is, what is the best move for black here? The best move for black is to go bishop e7. But then, I mean, we will naturally get a question, our g7 h6 is weak. I mean, why would we make a move like bishop e7? Because we have just played g6 to flank it over bishop, and then we are not doing that. Instead, we are putting the bishop on e7. Who would do this? So this is where I think we need to talk a bit about weakness, and like what are real weaknesses, what are perceived weaknesses, and so on in chess. So here h6 and g7 are weak undoubtedly, but the point is, can your opponent exploit them? So let's say, I mean, even some of the best players in the world, they will have, some sort of weaknesses in their, play in their game, some sort of, let's say they're weak in tactics or end game. But let's say your opponent is not skilled enough in end game at all. So even though you are weak in end game, if he's not skilled enough to exploit that, then that weakness is not really a problem, right? The same example can be applied here. Even though g7 and h6 is weak, there is no good way for white to immediately exploit it in any possible way. Immediate in the sense, at least for the next 10 moves, in my opinion, you cannot exploit it. So some sample variations would be something like queen d2, trying to long castle, so short castle, long castle. And the reason why I feel keeping the bishop on e7 could be better is because I feel by going d5, at some point maybe you can go some sort of knight b6 variations and try to jump in and attack with knight c4 or knight a4. This additional option, I think, gives some good possibilities, and also by keeping the bishop on e7, you get access to b4 if needed, and queen bishop b4 queen a5 kind of ideas. So here, so one sample variation when I was looking at this game, I thought was like, let's say white tries to go and immediately attack, goes f5. If f5, then black will go rook b8. We should not be taking a pawn because then our king becomes very exposed, so gf5 is certainly a no, but rook b8. And if f takes g6, here is a very fascinating decision that black has to make. Most logical move would be hg6 or the natural reflex, right? And more or less all these positions will capture with the h pawn, because we have been told capture towards the center, move your pawns towards the center. But here hg6, in my opinion, would run into big risk, because after hg6, white will go some sort of bishop d4 followed by queen h6 ideas, or hg6 and h4 immediately with h5 and opening up the h file, which would be very risky for black. So we should take with the f pawn, and then if knight d5 or so, trying to open up the position with a piece sacrifice, we capture and go king g7. And here black will consolidate his extra piece and will end up with a big advantage. So if white does not capture knight d5 but goes bishop e2 in this position, then it's pretty much a complicated position where I feel both sides have their chances. Maybe black would be slightly more preferable. Maybe slightly black is preferable than white. So another option is queen d2 is what we just saw in this position. If bishop e7, which was not anyway played in the game, if white goes bishop d3 with the idea to short castle, then both sides short castle and black takes control of the semi-open b file. And after knight a4, you go rook e8, queen d2, bishop f6. So the bishop did reach its optimal diagonal, which is this h8 a1 diagonal. And at the meantime, the knight still continues to be on d7, and I think an advantage of this, before we go further, if let's say if white, any of you were thinking why not bishop a7, black will just go back rook a8 and black is winning a piece, either a7 or a4. So because of that, bishop a7 would be a blunder. So after bishop f6, there's always a possibility for black to go knight b6 and push the knight away from a4. I mean, either exchange or push it back to c3. So that would be very good for black, in my opinion. Yeah. So here, but none of this happened in the game. Tony Miles went for knight f6, so that he defends the d6 pawn with his queen, so that it allows him to go bishop g7 the next move. So white plays on planned lines. He goes queen d2, bishop g7, and long castle. So here, I would ask the viewers to tell me what is your first instinct move without any calculation. Let's say you are seeing this position for the first time, someone is showing it to you in a blitz game, or it's some on the board. There'll always be a spark, like first spark that comes in your brain. So what would that be? Okay, Sarvan. Yeah, thanks for the feedback. I am trying to improve my internet connection. Like, I'm trying to get a better connection. Most likely next week, the connection should be better than this week. I'm in Madurai. I'm not in Bangalore, from where I would be very happy to stream, because there's a fantastic internet connection there. But I'm in Madurai, where the internet is slightly off. Yeah, short castle would certainly be one choice, and yeah, that's a good first instinct move. D5 is also, I think some people may have D5 as their first instinct move, possibly. And another, so let's say short castle, queen takes D6, then some sort of queen A5 or something. But the problem in most of those lines is I think white can just force a queen trade somehow, like queen A5, queen C5, or queen C7, queen D6, so on. The reason why I asked this particular question was most of the players, I think, immediately when they see long castle, they'll first see that the D6 is hanging, they'll go after D5. But there's also another interesting try outside of short castle, which is bishop G4. You're just counter attacking the bishop on, rook on E1. So if white goes bishop E2 in this position, then again the question is, if we ask what's your first instinct move, everyone will be like some sort of bishop takes E2, and then actually after bishop takes E2 I should ask this question, what's the first instinct move white has? And this is a very fascinating variation that I figured out that you're going to see now. It was just truly amazing for me to see this variation, which was none of this was the game, by the way. The point is, queen E2 is the most natural move, but there is a move which is stunning. Maybe if you want, you can take a guess. I'll give like 30-40 seconds, just a wild guess what that move could be. A very stunning move in this position. Okay, so here there is rook h e1, which is the other move. The point being, you're just ignoring the threat, because if white if takes on d1, you just go bishop b6, right? And you're just winning more material. You're winning the queen basically. And if short castle, you just take back, and this rook is way better on e2 compared to the queen being on e2 in this particular position. This is one. And another point about it is, let's say in this position, after bishop g4, if white played queen takes d6, then we have bishop d1. So this is a problem with bishop g4 though, which is this queen d6, bishop d1, queen takes e6 check, king f8, knight d1, rook c8, queen a6, and black does not have, black has material compensation, rook for bishop and 2 pawns, but the unfortunate set position of the king on f8 and rook on h8 makes me believe that black does not have enough compensation for the material. It's not even equal, unclear. I think white is clearly preferable. So let's get back into the game. So after long castle, hello Joachim, hello to the stream. So after long castle in this position, white played, black went d5 in this position, which is at that point in 1982, this move was a novelty. Now there is few more games played, I believe, in this particular move, but at that point in time it was a novelty. So after long castle d5, white went on to go bishop c5, which is a natural way of trying to exploit the problem of the d5, which is this diagonal, which was earlier closed. Now the diagonal is open, so white goes bishop c5, trying to exploit it. And for this, black went bishop e6. So he's just trying to first, close the e file, and then maybe if needed, go bishop f8 and push the bishop away, or knight d7 is always a possibility for black. So white went on queen d4. In my opinion, this is a bit risky move because you're running into this bishop on g7. So we have reached one critical moment, another critical moment of the game. And as a black, I think it's very critical now to figure out some plans and also support those plans with variations. So important, I think, is to figure out at least 2-3 candidate moves and support it with some basic variations. So I'll give the viewers few minutes.